Good morning. Lance Tarchioni and Adam Henniger here with you this morning on Ask the Agronomist. Got my fall harvest attire on here and hoping to get back out in the fields, which is probably where all of you are. So my guess is going to be a lot of people watching this at some point, or at least hopefully a lot of people watching this at some point after the fact. You're probably all busy either fixing something or unloading something or moving to the next field this morning. Harvest is going on at a rapid, unweather abated pace. My 2-week forecast has got nothing but sunshine and somewhere between beautiful fall weather and somewhat summer-ish weather. So a little concerned about how dry the beans are going to get. A little concerned about there's even corn that's going to be way drier than you would like it to be for harvest. So and when you're running old equipment like I am, you need a rainy day about every 3 days just to fix all the stuff that broke. So I'm gonna have to take off days of good running weather just to make repairs at the rate we're going. So a lot of crops been harvested, a lot of yield observations, a lot of chatter in the marketplace about yields. This is I've been referring to this as a first liar doesn't have a chance kind of fall. So if you're planning to brag, and I'm not saying you should, but if you're planning to brag, go in hot, because whoever you're bragging to has got really good yields as well. I calibrated a yield monitor yesterday, and took my 330 down to 300. So there is that as well. But plot yields phenomenal. Getting reports from growers of 300 bushel field yields in corn. Soybean yields flirting with the 100 bushel level, and that's the stuff that gets on Twitter. That's the stuff that every seed company loves to talk about. That's the stuff that you tell your friends, maybe just not your landlord or your neighbors in some cases. But it's not all that good, and there's a little bit of we get into this. I put the word expectations up here, kind of an important thing. And when you get a taste of 300 bushel corn or 100 bushel soybeans, or even 280 corn and 90 bushel soybeans, it's easy to like that. It's easy to celebrate that. It's easy to be thankful for that. And then you dive into some 230, 240 corn, and that's kind of a letdown there. Or you dive into some 68 or 72 bushel beans, and there's kind of a letdown there. I remember having a conversation with a dealer at the start of harvest. This was back probably 3-4 weeks ago. He'd had guys, harvesting some soybeans that were in the mid 60s, and they'd heard about, 80s and 90s, and they were, kind of upset with their 65 bushel soybeans. And I had to remind him that just probably 10 years ago ish, that would have been a yield that you would have been pretty darn happy about. And so we've really raised the bar on what our expectations are for yields. And frankly, we sometimes forget that when you get 90 plus bushel soybean yields, and when you get 280 plus bushel corn yields, there's more in that than the genetics that we're providing to you and the management that you're providing to the crop. There's also a little bit of luck. Let's be honest. You got to have the right weather at the right time. We do not control that. There's a big long list of things in my life I do not control, and weather would be pretty near the top of that list. And so, should you be proud of your accomplishments? Absolutely. But I guess I was talking to Adam this morning, and there's two ways to look at yields. You can be happy with your 90 or disappointed in your 70. And I guess I would rather be happy with the 90, because 90 is something we can't really count on a broad scale basis. I mean, yes. Does it happen? Absolutely. Does your good management and Adam's good genetics make it more likely to happen? Absolutely. Does your good management and Adam's good genetics guarantee it's going to happen? Hell no. There are no guarantees of 90 bushel soybean yields. So we need to kind of keep a little bit of perspective. Not every field out there is ringing the bell. There are some more average yields out there as well. And if I've had some average yields on my own farm with some varieties that have yielded 100 bushel on other people's farms. So, things do vary. You might have had too much rain at the wrong time. You might have had not enough rain at the wrong time. Did you get 1 4-inch rain or 4 1-inch rains? There is a big difference in those 2 4 inches of moisture. The 4 1-inch rains are going to do more good and less harm than the 1 4-inch rain is going to do. But the climate report's going to say you've had the same amount of moisture. So we'll talk about evaluating yields is on my list of things today, and some of the mistakes that we make when we try to evaluate yields. But if you've been in some stuff that's the best thing you've ever seen in your life, you're not alone. If you've been in some stuff that you're like, well, this is a good yield, but I've raised 74 bushel beans before. I don't know what everybody's so all excited about. That's out there too. That's probably not going to show up on Twitter. Your buddies at the elevator probably not going to be talking about that field, but those fields are out there. So don't get your dauber down if every field of beans you pull into is not making 90 and every field of corn you pull into is not making 200. So back to the list here. I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit. Let's do fall burn down reminder first, just to check that box. So I was harvesting some corn yesterday, and between every row, some really lush, pretty green chickweed down there, about yay tall. So next spring's winter annual weeds are emerging currently. Emergence of those might be a little bit slowed by how dry we are. It is exceptionally dry in a lot of areas and going to get drier. So, we're going to talk about cover crop seeding as well. Not particularly great weather for cover crop seeding, not particularly great weather for getting your wheat germinated. So we are going to need some moisture at some point. I was glad to get a little bit of moisture there. When was that? A week or so ago, Adam? We had, half an inch, 3/4 of an inch, maybe in some places. And then, southeast of us where the hurricane got up to, I mean, they wouldn't want to hear us talking about, boy, we need a rain. But, I get nervous when I'm in the combine and think I'm smelling smoke when it's as dry as it's going to be here in a couple weeks. So field fires and that kind of stuff always a concern when we get super dry. And if you're trying to get a cover crop established, you're trying to get wheat up. Good luck even getting your wheat drill in the ground. In some cases, it is so dry and hard in some of these fields. It might be hard to get that seed where you want it in the soil even. So fall burn down reminders. Remember, you don't have to spend a fortune on a fall burn down. You don't even have to use residuals in a fall burn down. We have a good residual product called Autumn Super that is a very popular fall burn down product. Works very nice with some 2,4-D, works very nice with some dicamba, works very nice with Roundup. Some people use it just it and 2,4-D by itself. But the residual piece is more about the timing of the fall burn down. So it gives you the ability to spray it earlier in the fall, and you don't have to wait till mid-November or later to make sure everything has already come up. And sometimes when you're trying to get anhydrous on, you don't want to deal with winterizing a sprayer. You got cold nights where, if you don't have heated storage for your sprayer, it's a little bit problematic to be trying to spray as we get closer to winter. But if you do have the flexibility to wait till later in the fall to put your fall burn down on, you can save some money and take the residual out. Even just a cheap basic 2,4-D dicamba fall burn down, which is about as no frills as you can get, is going to do a nice job on your mare's tail, your chickweed, your henbit. It's not going to get any of the winter annual grasses that are out there. So personally, I like having Roundup in my fall burn down, and some Roundup 2,4-D, some Roundup dicamba. You can get into the residual thing if you want to, but if you're trying to do fall burn down on a budget, You don't have to have that residual piece. So don't talk yourself out of doing it because you don't want to spend $20 on it. You don't have to spend $20 on it. You can do something that is less expensive that is still very much worth doing. So just remember, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. Remember that guy that this spring said, "Oh, I'm never making that mistake again. I'm going to do a fall burn down." I don't know where that guy went, but that guy's gone now, and he's been replaced by the guy that's going, "Well, I don't think I need to spend that money. Those fields look pretty clean. They don't look bad at all. I don't think there's any winter annual weeds going to come up. It's too dry." You can talk yourself out of doing it 6 ways from Sunday, but just remember how bad you wished you'd have done it last fall, back in the spring, and channel that guy, find that guy, reach deep inside, find him again, and get the fall burn down application made. You'll be glad that you did. Do some trials if you want to. You can actually there's people that have thought about writing a message in a field of henbit, and just think how cool it would look if you had these big block letters that spelled out some sort of message of clean soybean stubble, and the rest of the field was purple. You could do it the other way around. You could plant something in the shape of a word or a letter or a message or a picture. And people do some pretty cool stuff with GPS these days and drawing stuff out. But yeah, you could go into any random field in West Central Illinois. Well, any random long-term no-till field in West Central Illinois, and write a message in the henbit out there that would be visible from the moon in the spring. So anyway, enough on fall burn down. Related topic to that, we'll talk about cover crop seeding. So if you're if you want to utilize cover crops to suppress your winter annual weeds, they probably needed to be planted by now, I would say, because in some cases the winter annual weeds are already up, and they aren't going to completely suppress them if they're growing together with them. Now they will still suppress them some. You'll still get some of the benefit out of it. It's going to be hard to get those established with the with the dry soils that we've got. If you've got moisture in the soil and you can get the seed in the soil, hopefully you've got enough moisture to get going. If you're just broadcasting it on top, it's probably just going to lay there until you get a rain on it. So some of the cover crops might get a little bit later start than normal, which could influence their some of their weed control benefits. We flew ours on into soybeans about 3 weeks ago and caught that. Laid there dry for about 10 days, but then we caught about 3/4 of an inch last week, which hopefully will be enough to get that started. And when we cut those beans, we'll already have cover crop out there a couple inches tall, getting a good head start. So the other thing it's a little bit late to think about this, maybe something to think about for next year. But if you're getting serious about the cover crop things and you're doing more than just cereal rye or oats or wheat, if you're getting into some of the radishes, some of the brassica species, the rapeseed, clover, some of that kind of stuff, you do have to be a little more thoughtful about what herbicide programs you're doing in your corn and soybeans, because there are chemistries that we fairly commonly use in corn, and some that we use in soybeans as well, that can interfere with the establishment of some of those. Cereal rye is pretty forgiving. You can spray about anything you want and get a good stand of cereal rye. But if you've ever tried radishes, or tried a sugar beet, or tried a rapeseed or something like that, and you were dissatisfied in the stand establishment, possibility that there might have been something in your herbicide program that was a factor in that. Or it just could be the fact that those species are a little more finicky. I mean, cereal rye is you could throw it in the street and it will grow. Not everything is quite as forgiving as cereal rye, and that's one of the reasons why it's as popular as it is. The other thing I would remind you is you don't necessarily have to have it as thick as hair on a dog's back if you're just looking for the soil health, the benefits of having, live roots growing in soil, some erosion control. Now, if you're trying to use it for weed control, then you probably do want a pretty dense stand. Or if you're going to graze it, then you want a dense stand. But if you're just trying to qualify for a cover crop program and get some of the biological benefits of a cover crop, you don't have to put on, 75 pounds of cereal rye. 30 or 40 would be enough in a lot of cases to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And if you've already got a lot of heavy corn residue out there, which you know how much residue 300 bushel corn produces, Adam could tell you. He's weighed it. He calls it stover. If you want a fancy term for your trash out there, stover would be the appropriate plant physiology term. But there's a lot of residue in these fields. Now, we're getting harvest out early. It's going to have an opportunity to break down. Some of my crops already partially decomposed before I harvested it. So decomposition of residue has begun. You may have noticed that. So we don't necessarily have to add a lot of residue into that system because we've already got a lot of residue in that system. And if you're no-tilling your soybeans and you're fighting residue and you introduce cover crops into that, that is more residue. So it's there are benefits to cover crops. Those benefits are real, but there are also challenges. And if you're already struggling with residue management, just be aware that cover crop is going to make additional residue that you're going to get to manage. So the seeding rate, the species you select, when you plant it, when you terminate it in the spring, all of those things greatly influence how much additional residue is going to be out there. But it is something to keep top of mind. And there are some people that occasionally, learn the hard way that with all this positive chatter around cover crops, they do require management, or you're going to mess up a good field. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's talk about product evaluation. So we talked about yields. There's a lot of talk about yields. There's a lot of people bragging about how good something was. There's a lot of seed companies that are going to send postcards to your mailbox. My guess is the plot they put on the postcard, they probably won. They probably look pretty good. You may or may not have those products on your farm. And I guess I'll ask you, how do you evaluate seed products on your farm? And how do you make a decision, if you want to plant something different next year? If you want to plant more of the same, then you can assess that on your own farm. If you want to try something different, how do you decide, what else is out there? What should you be looking at? So we all do plots. Every company does plots. Adam does a lot of plots. Adam weighs a lot of side-by-sides. He gets in a lot of fields and gets farmer yields. Getting yield is easier than it used to be. Most of us have yield monitors in the combine, and we know instantly as we're going through the field how that product is performing. But we still, I think, make a lot of I don't know. I guess I'll say errors or mistakes or too many assumptions as we start evaluating products through the fall. And things like, is it in the same field? Was the planting date the same? Was the rotation the same? Was the harvest moisture similar? Was the management similar? And if you're going to compare, hybrid A to hybrid B, you need to factor all those things into that comparison. Because if you've got hybrid A in one field, hybrid B in another field, you've already committed a pretty major statistical sin there, comparing the yield of two different fields. Now you could say, well, I've farmed those fields for 20 years and they're almost always similar in yield, or they've got the same soil type, or they've got the same PI score. Well, soil type and PI score don't necessarily tell you the yield history of a field. But if you know the fields and they're usually similar, okay, maybe you can kind of glean a little something from that. But what if one of those fields, let's say it was soybeans, and let's say one field was 50-50 rotation and the other field was following 2 years of corn. That's a apples to oranges comparison. Let's say one field was planted in mid-April and one field was planted in early May. Well, that's an apples to oranges comparison. Let's say one field you started harvest in. Let's say it was corn. It was 25% when you started your harvest. The other field, you did it 3 weeks later and it was 17. Apples to oranges comparison. Let's say one field got fungicide, the other field didn't. Let's say one field got a different fungicide. Let's say all these management decisions that you make. One field got side dress, one field didn't. We don't always manage every field the same. And even if we do, every field is different. So I would personally like to restrict our product comparisons on the farm to products that were in the same field, which a lot of times, some people plant multiple products in the same field. Some people have a pet peeve against doing that, don't want multiple products in the same field. So if you always only plant one hybrid in the field, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to compare products on your farm, frankly. And one of the worst ways to compare products on your farm, and I think everybody's system probably has this, and that's the report that comes out of your yield monitor, where it lists the hybrids in order of yield. And so you got hybrid X, hybrid Y, hybrid Z, hybrid B, and there's 43 acres of this one, 105 acres of that one, 600 acres of that, and 125 acres of that. And this 600 cannot be compared to that 43, but yet they're ranked on the same list. And this one averaged 285, and this one averaged 265. And you say, well, that's 20 bushel difference. I'd say that's probably a better hybrid. If you can yield 265 across 600 acres, that's probably better than making 285 on the 43 acres out in the field. The other thing that happens is when you do plant multiple hybrids, how many of you have done this? Let's say you come into a field, and here's my field. There's trees all along here. You come into the field, you plant your end rows, and then you start planting, and then you switch to hybrid B. And so here's A with the end rows and that side of the field. And you're going to, let's say you got the same number of acres. Let's say there's 50 acres of A and 50 acres of B. And you go, well, that's pretty fair. They're in the same field. I got 50 acres of each. How could you get more fair than that? Well, I'll tell you, don't put the end rows on all one hybrid. Make sure both hybrids have the same amount of end rows. Because when the end rows are all in one hybrid, it's going to lose. Sometimes badly. If your ends are like mine, they got deer, trees, and coons and everything else destroying the end rows, and your end rows are making 76 bushel, I'm sorry, whatever hybrid got the pleasure of being on your end rows is going to get its ass kicked in that field. And so, even in-field comparisons, what we really need, I called Tom Eichhoff last night. I was thinking about this. So at 10 o'clock last night, I called Tom. Tom's been on here with me before, science lead at Climate. I said, Tom, somebody needs to design a data analysis digital tool that takes my 2,000 acres of farm ground and parses it down to the valid comparisons and throws away all the crap that this causes problems. Now the limitation of that would be is if we did it right, what you'd find out is you have no valid comparisons on your farm. So Adam's, as is often the case, producer Adam's ahead of the agronomist here, so he knew where that story was going to go, and that's probably why nobody's ever spent the money to build that tool, because it would be very depressing for you, the grower, for when you do the analysis and it comes back No data. You're like, well, what do you mean? I got 2,000 acres worth of data. I got good data. Tell me something from my data. I want to learn from my data. That's why you tell me I do my data. Is I want to learn from it. Well, we infer a lot of things from our data that should not be inferred from the data. When you have a 10% harvest moisture difference in two corn hybrids, that's about as useless as you can get, because that hybrid that was harvested 10% drier, did it lose 10 bushel? Did it lose 20? Did it lose 30? Somewhere in that ballpark, probably, how much less yield it put in the grain tank because it was harvested at 15% instead of 25%. I was harvesting 14% corn yesterday. I don't know how much better it would have been at 24 than it is at 14, but it would have been a lot better. And we just can't get everything harvested timely, and so you do the best you can. And then we got all this data, and we want to use our data, and so we generally misuse our data, because that's about all we can do with our data in some cases. And the soil type, the one thing that some program climate will do this, it'll separate yields by soil type, which that has some value if the soil data is accurate. But if you, so let's say you're looking at let's say you got some Tama, say you got some Clarksdale, and let's say you're on my farm and you got a lot of Rosetta, what I call good timber soil. So this yielded 280, this yielded 240, this yielded 260, and so you're okay. Well, and then you can look at how the hybrids did within soil types. But it's coming from all different farms. It's coming from all different harvest moistures. It's coming from it's going to take the Tama soil that you harvested that was 6606 in September, and the Tama soil that was 6422 that you didn't get out to the 1st of November, and it's going to throw all that together on that Tama soil. And even if you separate it out by soil type and hybrid, which you could do, it's still going to merge together. If you got a field that's got an APH of 280, and you got a field that's got an APH of 220, and they've got the same soil type, it's going to throw all that together. And it really, and back to what Adam and I were joking about, if you truly did it the right way and you threw out all of the invalid comparisons, you'd quickly realize, you need a lot of years and a lot of acres all in one big database to get something truly useful and usable out of it. So we do the best we can. We make observations as we're harvesting. When you're picking down corn, makes an impression on you, doesn't it? When you're picking beautiful standing corn that's still got all the tassels on it, still got all the leaves on it, and you're burning an extra 2 gallon an acre of diesel fuel just because it's a little tougher, a little chewier, you got a lot more material going through the combine, you notice that. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't. Maybe you sometimes a little bit too much fodder going through the machine. It would be better with less fodder, but you got to be careful with that because you got to have enough fodder left to hold the plant up. Tough beans. I was talking to one of my colleagues that was getting a little frustrated. Not going to call anybody out here, but maybe you've been this guy. Have you ever been harvesting 85, 90 bushel beans? And you're thinking, man, this is where it's at. I actually like soybeans when they're making 90 bushel. Have you ever been the guy that picks up the phone and says, these things are cutting like a, what? They are tough. I can hardly get through them. Don't complain about tough cutting 90 bushel beans. There is no such thing as an easy cutting 90 bushel bean. If you're giving the plant the opportunity to make you 90 bushel of beans, it's going to be tough. It's hard just getting that much material through the machine. even if they're not tough. And I get, if you want to cut some easy cutting beans, I got some 65 bushel beans you can finish cutting for me. They're going through like a knife through butter. But you don't want that. You want them to be healthy enough that they're tough. And so, I understand that some beans cut easier than others, and I understand you may stumble across something that's making 90 that cuts significantly easier than some other bean that's making 90. But don't get all pissy about your tough cutting 90 bushel bean, because again, back to that expectations. I would have a hard time being. I'll never be able to use this testimonial. Won't go through marketing, but I can use it here. I had a dealer tell me that a grower customer of his called him, and he said, I don't care how hard these beans are to cut. These are really good beans. I'm like, I like that testimonial, because that's kind of the proper perspective to have. Now, if you got tough cutting beans that are making 57, you can call Adam and bitch at him all day long when that's happening. But if your tough cutting beans are making 93, be glad you got tough cutting beans, because that's why they're making 93. So just keep a little perspective there.
Yeah, in the research world, it's all about repeatability and replication.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I don't want everybody to get too down on their data and not wanting to collect data.
Right? Yeah.
Because it's good reference information, but just understand that the inference or the confidence level of that information isn't truly scientifically something you can fall back on. And I know that a lot of people don't care about that, and I get it. But the reason why, Lance, what you're saying is true is because in a world where you have to prove something, you have to repeat that thing time and time again, so much that it says, okay, we can be confident that this isn't field spatial variability or soil type interaction or one of the millions of different things that can affect our yields. That's why we say your data isn't valid from a scientific standpoint, that you can look at it and say for sure this is what is going to happen all the time.
Right. And that kind of takes me to another point I wanted to make about, doing plots. We love our customers that do plots. A lot of the data that we generate every year that goes into those, 1,000 locations that Adam's talking about, so that you can make some sound decisions off stuff, are done by our customers. So thank you to our customers who do plots. Just like some of the things I said could make you not want to go to the effort to collect data, because like, well, if it's not worth anything, why am I collecting it? That's not what we're saying. Adam did a good job of distinguishing that. The same thing can happen from plots. When I tell you not to make any decisions based off of your own plot, you're like, well, if I can't make decisions off my own plot, why am I doing the damn thing? Well, you're doing it because we're going to combine it with 250 other people's plots, and then we can all learn something from all those plots together. But one plot, man, there's not much power in one plot by itself. The power comes from combining that with other plots and summarizing that together. I'll tell you a quick story. Hopefully the grower who told me this isn't listening, because he might remember telling me this. I had a guy one time tell me that he likes looking at individual plot data. He gets frustrated with seed companies who summarize their data. We always try to do some and summarize I'm distracting myself here because it's getting kind of glitchy. So I don't know if we're going to have a connection issue or not, but hopefully we're still going all right. But he told me, he says, don't give me summary data. He says, when I see summary data, I know you're trying to hide something. I'm like, no, that's not what we're trying to do with summary data. Summary data is designed to, I think that's probably bad. My screen is trying to close on me. So if you can get multiple locations, summary data from your seed supplier, that can be a better way to make decisions. You've seen products on your farm over multiple years. That can be a good way to make decisions. If you see the same thing rising to the top year after year, that's a good product. If you're talking to your 6 closest neighbor buddies and you've all got the same thing planted and you all liked it, that means something. The more observations you can put into any decision you make on the farm, the better that decision is going to be, the more repeatable that decision is going to be. And every year is different. We talk about that every year, and it's true every year. And the things that were good last year aren't necessarily always good this year. The things that are good this year won't be good next year. That's not because the product's changing. That's because the environment that the product in is changing. And there's always that genotype by environment by management interaction, which is what Dr. Belo likes to test a lot in his program at U of I. And how does the environment changing influence that product? How does your management decisions changing influence that product? And what can we learn from that about how we should manage that particular product, or maybe how you should manage on your farm? So we've talked about, so from a product selection standpoint, a lot of things go into that decision. You're gonna look at, how did it perform for you this year? You're going to talk to your trusted advisor, and he's going to make some recommendations to you. You're going to look at things like, harvest moisture, and, do you want to get an earlier start? Do you need more early corn? Do you want to plant some early full season stuff that you don't have to worry about for a while? Do you want to do the early bean early thing and start on soybeans? Do you want to get a lot of beans harvested before you do any corn? Do you want to do all your corn before you do any beans? Are you going to change your rotation? Do you need a different trait? All of these things go into that product selection decision. And really none of those have anything to do with performance. That's more just how do you want to manage things on your operation? We always struggle with timeliness in harvest. You're chomping at the bit to get started. You finally find a little bit of stuff that you can start on. You get started. You're doing the right thing. You're getting acres out, and before you know it, everything you've got left to harvest is all ready. And then you still got 1,000 acres to go, and it all needed harvested yesterday. And so we have the ability to plant stuff extremely fast these days. We get the crop in very quickly. This year planting dates were spread out because of Mother Nature. We had planting dates spread out over 6 weeks. And so there's corn that was not planted until the 22nd of May that in some cases is still 25% harvest moisture. And that's actually, kind of a good thing, because you got other stuff that's 14 that needs picked anyway. So you can, maybe get more of your crop out at kind of a more desirable harvest moisture if it's a little more spread out. So you can spread stuff out by using different maturities. Now to do that means you got to have early stuff, and sometimes there's a yield penalty associated with early products because you're not utilizing the whole growing season. Now this year, I think, especially in the case of soybeans, I think you might see some early beans, in some cases, maybe doing better than the full season beans because it just kept getting drier and drier and drier and drier. And there may be some late group 3s, which would typically beat a late group 2, that might not beat a late group 2 if they were planted at the same time, or maybe the late group 2 was even planted earlier than the late group 3. I'm seeing a little bit of a planting date trend in both corn and soybeans, where earlier planting dates are probably trending to be better. And in the case of soybeans, I think in some cases we're seeing a trend where early beans early might be kind of tough to beat versus a full season being planted late, just because we ran out of moisture late. We had very good moisture in general through the critical parts of the growing season, but August was dry. September has been extremely dry, and late August and early September for a lot of people was no moisture whatsoever. And I think if you've been in some soybeans that were, less than spectacular, and you're wondering, well, where's my 90 bushel beans? If you needed a good soak in rain the third week of August to add another 5 or 10 bushel of yield to your beans, most of you didn't get that. And we had, some fields of beans and the late May corn as well that really, really, really suffered from kind of that late summer flash drought that we had. We had plenty of rain in, late June. We had great rain through July. July rain typically is all we need to have a pretty good corn crop. But, if it gets dry late, that's going to have a bigger impact on full season products, and it's going to have a bigger impact on later planted products than it does on early season products or earlier planted products. So we're seeing, I think, a little bit of a trend. I haven't seen a planting date study support this. This is just kind of anecdotal on farms. So if we started planting corn, let's say early April, mid-April, late April, early May, and mid-May. So let's say early April is before 410. Mid-April would be 410 to like 420, maybe.
Yeah.
Late April would be after 20th. These two planting dates here have been pretty strong on corn. They've got good stands generally. They got off to a pretty good start. And they were, because we had the weekend of April 26th. You might remember this. I remember that. 26th is my mom's birthday. We had like 4 inches of rain that weekend. And I kid you not, even as dry as it was, on the Monday after April 26th, I had 200 acres underwater, just in ponds on the Monday following April 26th. And so the corn that got planted right ahead of this, and the beans too, that got planted right ahead of that, really struggled. There was some replanting in those. We completely tore up some fields. We spotted in some stuff. The stuff that was planted earlier than that generally was far enough along, had enough of a head start on it that it came through that pretty well. Then you get into May and stands get really good, especially on this mid-May stuff. Mother's Day was a little rough. Again, what is it, like 4 years in a row now that planting on Mother's Day Sunday turned out to be a bad idea. So somebody trying to tell you something. So there was some early May stuff that didn't have perfect stands either. That mid-May stuff was perfect. I mean, that probably, this probably compared to some of this as far as planting conditions and stand goes. This was not too good. Some of that was not too good. But what happened here? That stuff ran into, had generally more wind damage. Certainly had more aphids, if we're talking corn, and it got caught by the late drought. So as a result, more than one producer, a lot of guys haven't been in much of the May corn yet. So when you get into your May corn, you can assess this for yourself. But the trend so far has been just a little bit of a gradual decline in corn yields as you go with planting date. And that's we joke a lot that I'm kind of a May corn guy, and this is a hard year for people who were patient with planting corn. This is one of those years where it looks like the guy that was pretty aggressive on his corn planting probably going to benefit from that. Now, if being aggressive on corn planting makes you less aggressive on bean planting, well, you might lose more in beans than you gain in corn. But if you have the ability with the manpower and equipment to be aggressive at the same time in both crops, this was a good year to do that. Other production trends we're seeing. There was a lot of talk this summer about, do I need fungicide or not? I mean, you couldn't hardly find leaf disease in corn when it was time to be spraying fungicide. Corn prices were already on a decline. We could kind of see that coming. And so people are looking at, they're looking at how many bushels it's going to take to get a positive ROI on a fungicide application. And if you weren't really committed to doing that, if you weren't a true believer in corn fungicide, it was a little bit easier to, and some places were dry too. So we had dry weather going on. We had 0 visible leaf diseases in corn. And we had a corn price that was looking like it was going to be sub $4 by fall. And if you're not truly committed to fungicide, like I'm going to do it no matter what, you start factoring those, those variables into your calculation to try to decide whether you're going to do it or not. And it wouldn't have been too difficult for some people to talk themselves out of that. We are seeing a significant difference in fungicide application or not application in corn and soybeans. So we were talking about those yields that may be a little bit disappointing in some cases relative to what you're hearing. Well, if you opted not to do fungicide, that could be some of that difference that you're seeing on your farm. Because we have seen some nice 20, 30 bushel yield responses in corn from fungicide. We've even seen some nice 10 or 15 bushel bumps from a second application of fungicide in corn in some cases, which we maybe didn't necessarily anticipate. But it's hard to. That's another one of those variables that it's really hard to predict when and to what extent you're going to get a yield increase out of fungicide in either corn or soybeans. But we are seeing a nice positive bump, probably more than people would have expected based on the level of disease pressure that was there throughout most of the growing season. The corn that got sprayed with fungicide has disease in it as well, so it's not like it prevented all disease, but it is healthier, it is yielding more, and there is a nice positive bump there from that application, in spite of the fact that we didn't have super high disease pressure. Let's see. We talked about yield trends a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about what might be causing. If you do get into a field that's kind of mediocre, and mediocre for this year is, let's say, upper 60s, low 70s beans, which that's pretty damn good for mediocre. And mediocre corn's probably 225 to 240, let's say, which is also pretty good for mediocre. But it's not 90 bushel beans, and it's not 280, 290 corn, right? So what's driving that? So I think in some cases, stand was off in corn. So your stand could have been off because of challenging emergence conditions. Your ear count could be off because of green snap. There's a lot of fields of corn around that have 10, 20% green snap in it. And when you take 10 to 20% of your ears out of the field, 240 with 20% green snap is pretty damn good corn. That probably could have been 280 or 290 if you hadn't lost those ears. So there's lots of variables out there. The aphid damage and some of the late May corn, we haven't probably been in a lot of that yet. And I think in some cases, some of those later May planted fields, if they did get hit pretty hard with aphids, you could see some pretty surprising yield spreads in some cases, just from, that's another thing causing barren plants. So, your green snap's causing a stump with no ear on it. The aphid plants, the whole plant's there, but it either completely or partially aborted the ear. And so you might have a third of an ear, you might have half an ear, you might have 2/3 of an ear, you might have nothing on those aphid plants if they were severely enough affected by aphids. You can still tell those plants, they still got a weird look to them. They're just black in the field. The top of the plant's kind of stunted in some cases. So if you're walking a field, even now at harvest, looking at barren plants, it's not that difficult with a little bit of practice to identify, oh, well, that plant obviously was infested with aphids. I can tell that still. And then, it wasn't drought stress. It wasn't, herbicide injury. It wasn't, I sprayed my fungicide at the wrong time. It wasn't, the hybrid. It was too many aphids is what caused that barren plant. So there's definitely, if we look at rainfall patterns, so, sometimes you get through the whole growing season without having that 5 or 6 inch rain. And that's a good thing. People talk about how it seems like the heavy rainfall events are increasing. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I do know that heavy rainfall events are bad. They cause erosion, they cause ponding, they cause flooding, they cause anaerobic soil conditions. There's no good way to get 6 inches of rain at the same time. If you're in an awful drought and you're about to burn up, you'll take a 6-inch rain, and you'll take rain any way you can get it, but it would be better to get it in moderation, obviously. And that, if you get 3/4 inch rains timely, you can raise a hell of a crop on less than half normal rainfall if it comes the right way at the right time. When you get those big 6-inch rains, most of that's, I remember, I think Adam in the Golden area last spring, you guys had a big rain, and when every dry dam in your field gets topped and they're running over because the water can't get through the tile system fast enough, you're not getting the benefit of a lot of that moisture because it all ran off. It's causing erosion, it's causing ponding, you're losing fertility, it's just messes up your herbicide program. There's just nothing good that happens when you get those big rain events. And so if you had a couple big rain events, that's probably going to hurt your yield versus if you would have had, more moderate rain events. And that's just an example of one of those things that we can't control. And your good management and Adam's good hybrid, does not prevent the damage that happens from a 6-inch rain. That's just that's an act of God. That's Mother Nature. They're in control. We're not. And those things definitely impact disease development. They impact your fertility. I think we've probably got some fields out there where we've lost nitrogen this year with the amount of rainfall that we had. And that might depend on the hybrid and the soil type, how big of an impact that had on yield. And sometimes it might have a bigger impact on late season plant health and late season standability and wind damage and stalk lodging, maybe even more than it does on yield, because corn can, and Adam's seen this, any of you who have done a nitrogen rate study in corn, corn gets ugly a lot faster than it loses yield when you start taking fertility away from it. And the most profitable rate of fertility, and I wanted to talk a little bit about fertility, and there's going to be a lot of people that are putting a sharp pencil, maybe sharpened it too long and it's ground down to a little stub, but a sharpened pencil on their program for next year, trying to figure out how in the heck we're going to, get some black ink instead of red ink. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure on fertilizer rates. And, there's going to be some people saying, well, maybe we'll just skip this, or maybe we'll cut this in half, or maybe we can get by with less of this or less of that. Just be aware that, that matters. And I think in some cases, some of the fields that are producing the best yields this year probably had a luxurious amount of inputs put on them. And if you take away the luxurious amount of inputs that's been being put on them, you're probably going to take away some of the bushels as well. Now it doesn't necessarily mean it's a wrong thing to do, but just understand that, as you start subtracting things from your input system, if you can subtract without losing yield, do that all day long. As soon as you start costing yourself bushels, well, then you got to be careful, because if you save $2 and give up a bushel of $4 corn, you just lost $2 by saving $2, right? So that's the $1 million question that frankly nobody can answer is, well, if I don't do this, how much is my yield going to go down? Nobody knows. Somebody who says they do is full of crap. So you're going to have to make a judgment call for yourself. If this $20 thing you've been doing, if you're not confident it's going to give you at least 5 bushel of corn, well, then don't do it. Now, if the $20 thing you've been doing is corn fungicide, I'm pretty confident you're going to get more than 5 bushel benefit out of that, and you need to keep doing it. And you're going to have to do that with your fertility. You're going to have to do that with your nitrogen. You're going to have to do that with your starter fertilizer. You're going to have to do that with your sidedress application. You're going to have to do that with, this even better herbicide program that you're going to want to do next year to get better weed control than what we did this year. All that stuff has a cost, and it's really hard when you're sitting down trying to decide what to do to know, what impact on your yield changing that, input decision is going to make. But we do know this: if you lose yield, it's really difficult to be more profitable with a lower yield, because oftentimes the yield that you're giving up costs you more than the money that you save that you put in your pocket, just with the commodity system that we're in. And I know it's a vicious cycle, catch-22 here. We got low prices because we got too much supply. And how are you going to be profitable next year? You're going to raise a hell of a yield is how you're going to be profitable. You're going to make even more supply. And so I get that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But you can't magically sell the crop for more than the market is going to give you. And so we got to raise a good crop and just hope that somehow we can work our way out of this glut that we're in. But if working the way out of the glut means you got to raise half a crop, that's going to be that's going to be tough, because that price isn't going to respond quickly enough to probably make that a winning proposition for you. Okay, let's talk fall fertility real quick. So I mentioned, guys are going to be wanting to, thinking about, can we cut this out or cut that out? There's a lot of chatter around, one of the most overpriced things in the world these days is phosphates, and there's lots of conversation around, well, can I put on less phosphorus, or do I need phosphorus? Obviously we need phosphorus. It's a very critical nutrient for both corn and soybeans. The soil has an ability to supply quite a bit of phosphorus. If you've got really good P-tests because you've been putting on phosphorus, might be a good year to take that into consideration. But, I don't like just not applying things, because eventually that's going to catch up with you. But there are things you can do, also, if you want to do some scary math, figure out what the removal amount of nutrition is for 300 bushel corn. Yowza. So if you're harvesting some hellishly good corn, you are removing a lot of nutrition out of your soil. And even just putting back what you took out is going to be pretty cashy. But, I think you're probably being profitable with that 300 bushel corn, and can reinvest in that. So don't forget that too. We can look at things like, removal rate spreading, look at variable rate spreading. You could maybe get some new soil tests done to see where your soil tests are at. There are ways to be smarter with our fertility, applying fertilizer annually versus, I wouldn't be doing a 2-year spread right now. I'd do 1 year worth. Let's put back what we just took off, or put on what you think next year's crop needs. There's no need in putting on for 2 years right now, because that's less efficient anyway. And, you're probably better off just to, we'll deal with 2 years from now, a year from now, rather than doing a 2-year spread today. So maybe if you're used to doing a 2-year spread, maybe this would be a good time to switch to what I think is a better program anyway. And that's spread every acre every year on a 1-year type spread. I'd advocate, if you don't have current soil tests, I'd get soil tests done. There's certainly ways that you can try to be more efficient with your fertility, but and then Dr. Belo's work would certainly support this. He gets lots of responses from fertilizer on soil that the soil test says doesn't really need fertilizer. So be careful about just saying, I'm just not going to do that, because the yield impact of that decision might be more than you give it credit for. Maybe you can use a little less, maybe you shouldn't cut back at all. Don't know. But if you just say, oh, I'm just going to take this year off, I'm not going to do that, there's a good chance that's probably going to have some impact on your yield. So I think we're pretty close to time here. Anything else, Adam, that we were supposed to talk about that we forgot? Plug yield chasers again, just because we like Jennifer. We got big yields out there, and we want to celebrate those big yields. That's what yield chasers is all about. If you know somebody that's turned in a 320, don't make that one of make you want to not turn in your 290 because it's like, well, I already know I'm not going to win, so I'm not going to bother turning that in. 290 is an awesome yield. I don't care if you're not going to win. Turn that in. We'll celebrate that. You can come to the banquet. We'll have a good meeting. We'll have a good meal. We'll have a good time hanging out with other people that had good crops. And so get your entries in. I know Jennifer was pleased a couple weeks ago. We had a team call, and there's already some entries in. So that's good. A lot of times that stuff gets kind of last minute put in towards the end of the year. The cutoff, I think, was mid-December, 15th ish, I think. So we got time, but there's no reason to wait till then. If you've got the yield now, turn it in now. So Jennifer, I didn't say we have time. I said you got to get it in now. So you can get those entries in. Your FSR or your dealer can help you with that. Remember, you can use scale tickets. You can use climate data. I would ask this. Now, we have no way to verify this. We trust you, but a lot of you have the ability. I do this on every field of mine. I do a post-harvest calibration of my yield data. I would ask that you post-harvest calibrate your yield data in the system before you enter that into the contest. So just be honest. We got really good yields. You don't need to cheat to have good yields this year. So we don't. We trust you. We want to make it easier for you to participate. Nobody's getting free tuition for their kid to U of I as a result of this contest. So it's not big stakes. So we're pretty trusting on it, but like I say, there's no reason to not be honest about your yield data. We're already letting you pick out the sweetest 10-acre parallelogram that you can find in your field. Now I say parallelogram because the sweetest 10-acre amoeba that you can find in your field does not qualify for yield chasers. So keep it square, keep it rectangular. I'd even let you do a rhombus. You remember what a rhombus is? It's like a square that's kind of tilted over. A couple barns I drive by that look like a rhombus. I'm wondering when they're going to come down. So anyway, thanks for your time here this morning. Be safe during harvest. It's long days, hard days, frustrating days. I know a little story on myself. I was it was big 4-inch rains. My father-in-law's got a field that bad things happen when he gets a big rain. And one of the bad things that happened is the water that comes out of his neighbor that goes across his field carved out about an 18-inch deep ditch across this field. And so I'm coming up on that, and there's some and they're baling the corn stalks off this field. So they said pick it low, because we want to get corn stalks baled off of it. So I got the head right down on the ground. And so when the snouts on the corn head drop in the ditch and you don't raise the head fast enough, what do? You stick them in the other bank, right? So I did that to number 7 and number 8, rolled those babies clear underneath the corn head, broke all the brackets, $1,500, and 3 hours later, we were up and going again. So when I do stuff like that, safety is not top of mind for myself or anybody around me. People get hurt when things like that happen. So keep safety top of mind. And you might have a corn head with 2 brand new snouts on it that looks kind of dumb because the rest of it's all old. But you're still getting home at the end of the day, which is what's important. So everybody stay safe, take care. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks, which is the 17th, October 17th. So we're in October. Fall is here. Keep pressing on the harvest, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.